Thanks for listening to Leadership Level Up. I'm Brian Prairie.
And I'm Dr. Jeff Williamson.
I am just starting my leadership journey.
And I've been guiding leaders for 30 years.
Our podcast aims to shine a spotlight on outstanding leaders and provide a platform for them to describe their leadership journey and share the guiding principles that have helped them become great leaders.
Welcome to Leadership Level Up. I'm your host, Jeff Williamson, and I'm excited today to have a friend with me who I have talked to several times before. But before I officially welcome him, I want to tell you about some of the cool things that he has done. Donnie Bedney, our guest today, has made it his personal mission to drive change through people. He's the president of PSP Metrics, a talent assessment company that he acquired at the end of 2020. Founded in 1946, PSP Metrics provides highly innovative and science-backed solutions in employee selection and development. Donnie's also currently an operating partner at ScaleCo Management, an investment-based platform that aims to provide sustainable growth for profitable companies that have plateaued. Through his career, he's achieved extensive experience in consulting, human resources, healthcare, private equity, just to name a few. In a previous role as the chief human capital strategist of DumaWorks, he was selected to participate in a U.S.-Africa initiative. Can't wait to hear about that, wherein U.S. business leaders were placed in prominent African companies. Through this, he was able to serve as a chief operating officer for a technology startup in Kenya. In his previous role, he was also a consultant at the Gallup organization, and y'all know I am all about strengths and love talking anything about human development and people growth. And Donnie, you live in that space all the time. So officially welcome to Leadership Level Up.
Oh, thank you so much for having me, Jeff. I'm excited. And as you and I, kind of spoke up offline and otherwise, we can talk, my friend.
Oh,
so
man.
Whenever I can get the opportunity to spend a dedicated amount of time talking to you, I always take a lot away from our conversations. And
same here.
I'm sure my hope is that your leaders, the leaders who are listening to this podcast will take something away that they can use.
And I also meant to give a shout out to your podcast, Only Dream Big. That was really how our paths crossed. You were kind enough to have me on for a couple of sessions on your podcast. Yeah. And we were fast friends. So when we started doing our side of the thing, I said, I know a dude we have to have on, because we had
they should definitely check out that last episode we did together. It'd be great.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. So we shared just a little bit with folks about your leadership roles, the different things that you have done professionally, and it is exciting and impressive. And, so we'll talk a little bit more about that. Actually, we'll talk quite a bit about that. And but I love to start with just kind of some pieces of your story. Who were some people in your present or your past who you're like, man, they do leadership right, and here's some things I really observed and learned in them. What would come to mind?
Man, probably one of the first ones, man, that I've been reflecting on a lot as my family and I are moving back to Cleveland would actually be my grandfather. My grandfather ran a men's locker room actually at Shaker Heights Country Club for 40 plus years. And, honestly, probably one of the best leaders that I've ever had the opportunity to witness. Keys there were, just a level of authenticity. He was a gentleman that, woke up every single morning and said every day is a good day. Right. So I think some of that positive and growth mindset, was a really big deal.
Yeah.
He also really, really genuinely cared about people. And he led with that to the point where he never really and still to this day at 85, 86 years old, doesn't forget a name, a face, the last conversation, that you had. He has this unbelievable ability to just lock in and be present with whoever he was speaking with at that time. Mm-hmm. And it literally has endeared him to folks over the years.
Of course. I want to grow up to be like that.
Because you get to do that, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
Unbelievable, man. So I I started working with my grandfather right after I graduated 8th grade. And that's how I paid to go to private school in high school. So it just turned into, and he still, is truly more like a father to me, but, has been just an unbelievable example of leadership. So it just top of mind. That's one of the first people that comes to mind.
You didn't have to look far for a great example.
Yeah, absolutely.
Of service and kindness and respect. And as you mentioned, just to see people and to lock in. People know if we are or if we are not pretty quickly.
Man.
And that,
absolutely.
don't they? Yeah. And that's so endearing, as you said. So he's in his 80s. Wow.
Yeah.
God bless him.
Him and my grandmother, man. I just saw him last night, funny enough. So this move to Cleveland is kind of a return home, if you will, and just getting a chance to, see them and reach out and physically.
So they
spend
live
time
pretty
with them.
close to where you guys will be when the family gets settled.
About 15 minutes or so max.
Even better.
It's great. Yeah.
Wow.
It's really great.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, it's great when you don't have to look far to see
absolutely.
some heroes, some people that know how to engage and love other people. And that's in your bloodline, that's in your DNA, and I can see that. I'd love to meet him sometime. Good friend of mine.
We can figure it out.
Yeah, a good friend of mine attended his wedding last summer, and he had always talked about his pops. Just a huge it factor in his life, and I got to meet him, and so same goes for you. Yeah. We need to make that happen. That'd be cool. He's a legacy for sure. Yeah.
Well, next time you're in Cleveland, we'll get together.
It could happen. I get to Ohio now and then.
There we go.
So you have that great experience with your grandpa, and you start working with him as a young teen, and
about 13 or so. Yep.
Wow. Did you do that through junior high school, or just a couple years, or what did that look like?
I did it all the way. The last summer I worked at the country club was the summer right after my freshman year of college.
Great.
So
you were schooled by your sweet grandpa on how to connect and how to engage. So of course you bring that with you, right? You go into college and then your profession and you bring that with you. So how did you convert that knowledge and that observation of your hero grandpa to say, okay, I can do that in my work too. I can bring that to work and show that joy and that, hey, I'm glad to be here. How did you bring that with you?
Yeah. Well, I think, in a funny way, and you kind of read this, but when I coined this term of driving change through people, it was an epiphany that I had, a while ago, Jeff, where, I truly believe that human capital is the most valuable asset that any organization has. And so, a lot of people want to, choose what, metrics or, KPIs that they want to focus on. But the reality is to me, the organizations that get the people aspect right win. And I think that they will win even more, coming out of this Black Swan event that we were all blessed to, make it through. Right.
You framed that so gently.
Well, but I believe that, right? So, if any of our listeners have, studied kind of Black Swan events, what do we see, right? A significant increase in innovation, creativity, and speed of change, right?
Whether we liked it or not.
Absolutely. Right? How many people remember that remote work, has always been a thing, but until the world shuts down with a global pandemic, organizations don't do it.
Yeah.
And now, of course, we're, experiencing this new reality of hybrid work. And a lot of leaders are, candidly kind of fighting against it.
Right.
I read a new article, every other day, it feels like now, where organizations are pushing people back into the office, right? We have to know what you're doing.
Yeah.
All of that. And so I think that, one of the things that I was to also directly answer your question, I think applying and just understanding that, getting to know people, doing my best to be my authentic self and show up in a way that I believe is unique, because there's 8 billion people in the world and only one Donnie Bedney. And I believe that, if I can do everything I can to, show up in that authentic way, then I get the ability to kind of free up other people to do the same. People that work for me, people that work with me. It also candidly gives me an appreciation that everyone else in rooms or podcast or, that they all have a unique worldview and perspective that can add value to anything that we're doing. And so I do my best to be open to kind of receiving that feedback, to asking, additional questions, and asking questions from the perspective of understanding as opposed to simply answer or to respond, right? And take the time to listen, once again, to understand as opposed to simply respond.
So with what you were describing and the struggle that companies are having, especially those who are saying, nope, you got to be back. We need to see you in your chair, in your cube, in your office for us to feel like you can be productive. So, that's a big struggle. I mean, I'm a dad with, 2 daughters in their 20s and a son who's 31. And 2 of those 3 have been working remotely for an extended period of time, not just because of COVID. And they're both pretty much like, if they tell me I have to go back to the office in 5 days a week set up, I quit. I'll give them my 2 weeks notice. I'm not going to do it. After I've done this, I know the benefits, I know the risks, and I'm not going back to my cube. So if they say that, I'm turning in my 2 weeks, and I know they're not alone.
Yeah.
What
and I think, man,
what's your read been and the environment? Because you work closely with engaging people and employee retention, and it's a big piece there.
Yeah, and we're talking about leadership largely today, right? And so I think that it's such an interesting time, my friend. There's going to be case studies about this, about these years, 20 through, I think, at least 25, but definitely through the rest of this year, because we're seeing a lot of organizations struggle with it, and I think at least for the rest of this decade, it's still going to be a challenge because you have so many. We were talking about generational differences prior to, global pandemic, and I think that they're just being exacerbated right now, right? And so, particularly baby boomers, I think, are struggling, with just the variation of kind of how they came up from a career perspective and. Gen X, especially older Gen X's are probably closer to baby boomers, similar to how younger Gen Xers, while they don't want to admit that they're probably a lot closer to millennials than they would care to admit. I have some colleagues and close friends who are claiming to be what's the term, X-Xennials. So I guess it's that crossover, or
it's like whatever. The new model.
Whatever. Right. Like, just come on, man. Like, but that's because of this supposed disconnect away from millennials who apparently, are unique, and nobody really knows what Gen Z, we're just starting to experience Gen Z a little more. And so where I was going with that is that, we find a bunch of, we once again had generational differences in the way people were managed and all of that, right? It was a lot more of, I don't want to say we were, kind of fresh off of the assembly line, right? But it was more like, hey, you clock in at this time, you work here, you at the same place for forever, you'll retire with your pension plan, right?
That's that embedded mindset. Right? That was embedded.
We are here. Company, we're loyal to the company is loyal to us, right? And you start seeing those shifts over the years, and I think that you end up finding that some of these generations now, and candidly, even older, folks, right? I live still consider the Boston area home because my family is still there, right? And so where my family is, that's where my home is. And, I know for a fact that, people at times it's taking, folks anywhere from an hour to potentially 2 hours to get in the morning, and that same amount of time going back home. Right. Yeah. And so it's almost counterintuitive, but I haven't heard many workers calling out organizations to say, look, me working from home is actually saving you 4 hours in productivity. Like, I could be productive for these 4 hours as opposed to in traffic. Not to mention, these impacts now that people are starting to study things around stress and, overall well-being, and, what do those things do to you, going forward. And so I believe that some organizations are doing an excellent job of just, once again, listening to understand. I think that I'm not sure that there's great data, to even judge productivity, candidly. I don't know, like, what are people looking at? Are you looking at keystrokes, or, are they measuring the amount of time we're on Zoom? I've been a part of organizations where they want everybody to share their calendars, right? But, depending on your role, do you always have meetings on your calendar, right? Or do you just get to a point where, counterintuitively, people just start blocking off extended periods of time and labeling it something? And so does that mean that they're being more productive, or does it mean that, we're just getting into these kind of perfunctory, kind of habits, and people just begin checking the box? And so I'm not 100% sure of the answer, Jeff, but what I am 1,000% sure of, and would actually be willing to bet all of my future earnings on, is that organizations that are willing to have conversations with their current employees about what their needs are, a little bit more, and listen from the perspective of understanding, not simply to respond, but literally to understand the perspective of those folks, I believe will be significantly farther ahead than organizations who don't ask their employees at all, have always managed this way, and so, are going back to, quote unquote, the way that they've always managed. I think that they're going to find themselves in a lot of trouble, attempting to do, what feels comfortable for them, because I'm not convinced that they are actually holding up a mirror and in a funny way, like, telling themselves the truth. I think that they're almost looking into a mirage and, somehow believing that by people coming back to the office and being able to physically see them, that somehow their organization will be better. And I'm just not convinced that that is true.
Yeah. No, I'm not either. And I say this with tongue in cheek, but it's like, well, we were 100% productive when we were all in one building or two buildings, right? There was no wasted time, no loss of productivity there.
So hilarious. Or was there? old terms, what are the conversations around the water cooler? Should we continue going back and forth with additional office slang?
Yeah.
What is that really? Right?
Yeah.
How many times did somebody stop by your office just to chat about something, and then you end up talking about something, the game last night, or whatever else? And so
half hour later,
nobody's tracking that lost productivity.
No, because I'm in the office.
But what are you doing? Right. And you would know this well, because you do this arguably, more than me, but, how many studies have come out, over the years, technically, around things like, okay, well, let's just educate some of our listeners. They probably already know it because they're probably better educated than me, at least. But the 40-hour work week, right? How many times did we? I saw kind of like a chart, and somebody was talking about give 100% at work, right? And I believe that most organizations believe that that's 40 hours plus a week, right? But this chart, when it talks about giving 100% at work, actually showed, it was kind of a joke, but it was showing, effectively the productivity and how an employee would view that. And so it's something like, my math isn't going to be great on this, but we're going to roll with it. It was something like 10% on Monday, right? 20% on Tuesday,
right?
40% on Wednesday, right? So what are we at? 70%?
Yeah.
20% on Thursday and 10% on Friday, right?
So you're getting your 100%.
That's your 100%. But once again, from a productivity perspective, how many folks are taking a project that with focused effort may take 2 to 4 hours,
right,
and simply spreading it out over like 2 to 4 weeks because I need to be working on something, right? Because the reward of completing these things is just more work.
Yeah.
Right. So once again, I think from a leader perspective, God willing, folks will continue to, once again, talk to your people and listen from the perspective of understanding, but also have a curiosity to call into question once again, some of these metrics and more so mindset around productivity and other things that historically we've always thought like it's always this way. Well, is it? I challenge you as you're listening today and you're listening to Jeff and my conversation, like begin to challenge some of those things, because while there are people who report to you, maybe people that you report to who are willing to swear that like these things are true and they're absolutely true and almost completely infallible. I would propose to you that there are ways of thinking about productivity and even leadership that are antiquated. Maybe they were true at some point, or candidly, they may have never been true, but they were just a way that, people, based on the time, based on the assembly line, right? Putting out Model Ts based on whatever the time period called for, that fundamentally are just not true. And I would encourage you to continue to question, some of those things. Once again, not from the perspective of simply being adversarial,
right,
but from the perspective of truly understanding. And also beginning to think about what is the end result that we actually want. If the goal is project-based work and someone that you've decided to pay for 40 hours a week, if that's how you judge their salary or whatever else, are you paying them to simply work 40 hours a week because they're a salaried employee, they're not hourly? Or are you paying them for the level of expertise and the effectiveness that they bring to work on a weekly basis and daily basis? Because if they get that same work done in 3 days, as opposed to 5, do you care if they come in Thursday or Friday, or maybe they're just your friend and you want to hang out?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Because if we're focused on outcomes, if we're focused on deliverables or any of those kind of buzzwords that are out there, as long as we get those things that we require, request, or need from that team member, who cares, right? Because sometimes you'll have cases where someone could really get something done in 2 or 3 days and they take 5 to 6 because they just feel like they can, or that they're not
all the time.
Yeah, because the accountability and then what we're delivering is maybe not as easily measured. It's like going back to your comment where you said, I'm not sure how effectively we measure productivity, even in the past, or especially in kind of this new normal that we're living in.
Yeah, no doubt.
Yeah. So, and to be fair on, we've talked about leaders that are pressing their employees to do certain things or to not want to modify what used to work. It's also been a tough time for leaders because,
oh my gosh,
Yeah, there was no onboarding really.
Mm-hmm.
There was no preparation to say, okay, if we have to go remote with 24 hours notice, let's do a run through. Like when we were kids doing, fire drills. We had
drills. Yeah,
had to run out of the building, meet up at the swings, and wait till our teacher said it's safe to go in.
Yeah.
So I do have empathy and compassion for leaders that were like, I was hit with this and 10 employees and we didn't have computers for everybody and I had to think fast and it was tough. So leaders, that's my love back to you is we don't think that it's just this one-sided thing where your employees are needing a lot and you just have to flex. I think, Donnie, your point was the best, was talk to them, listen to them. They may help us figure out some things that make our work better. They may help us figure out some things that make our work more meaningful because whether it's efficiencies or new models or new offerings, it has the potential, and I know you see this, and it's like we have a chance to really figure out some new models and some exciting new opportunities we never had to think about. And then we come out of the last 2+ years and we're thinking, okay, some of the stuff that we really were forced into turned out okay. And we're going to keep some of that. We're going to keep some of those practices and approaches because we learned some things through this trial that we can be effective in multiple places. We can mix things differently and have engaged employees who love their work but aren't just warming a chair to determine their perceived value to us.
And just to continue shouting out our leaders, man. I mean, being a leader is not for the faint of heart.
Exactly.
Right? We can acknowledge that a lot of organizations simply, there's a lot of folks probably listening to this podcast who technically never chose to be a leader, right? Maybe didn't even wake up to, be a leader. They were a phenomenal individual contributor and their reward for doing that was somebody said, hey, you should be a leader.
And they were thrust into it sometimes.
Absolutely. Right.
Yeah.
And that is challenging in and of itself because you go from, working with peers to now having to figure out how to manage them. Right.
Yeah.
And that's a challenge. Right. And so, even in my own life, just, growing as a leader, there are some hard lessons, both around accountability, the being willing to make decisions that, candidly, other people may not agree with, right? And I was reading this book the other day. Was it Scaling Up? I think by Verne Harnish. And one of the things in the people section that they talk about is there's 3 types of people in an organization, right? So there's people that are accountable, right? And sometimes those people, with accountability have some sort of authority, right? But then there's the people with ultimate authority, which may be, some of our listeners, right? You may be CEO, president, buck stops with you, right? You got the ultimate authority. And then the third is who's responsible. And technically, everyone that's working for the organization is responsible for the success of the organization, right? But thinking through that, and now as a leader, you are held accountable for something, right? Once again, whether or not, especially if you're a frontline leader or even mid-level manager, you may not necessarily have the authority to actually change directly for the people who report to you any of these situations. But I encourage you to have the courage to go to those people with the ultimate authority and hold them accountable and share with them, once again, as you're thinking about the ultimate outcomes, which Jeff just referenced, hey, if we make these changes, I believe that we can be more effective at hitting our outcomes, right? Because I also believe there's one of the challenges as a leader is, do we want to make things more efficient? Absolutely. But I ultimately believe that effectiveness is kind of, how can we help our team be more effective at what they do? Because efficiency has a lot more to do with time as opposed to, once again, like completing the outcome and doing it in the best way that's both, I'll say, profitable for our business, helpful to our client partners who we serve, right? All of those things. And once again, reminders that, as you're talking to the people who report to you, that we are all in this together. We are all responsible for the success of the organization.
Mm-hmm. Well, I have one more question for you here in our last minute or two before I let you go.
Sure.
I do a lot of work with 20-somethings. I just refer to that age range because then we don't have to get like, well, are you actually Gen Z or are you millennial? 20-somethings. That's my general term. So I do a lot of work, have a lot of friends who are 20-somethings. And if you were having a cup of coffee with me and one or two of them, what would be kind of a parting word or two you would give to them to say, hey, me and Jeff have been around the track a few times, so we've learned a few things. Here's a couple of suggestions or words of wisdom that I'd give to my 20-something friends. What might that be?
3 things that really popped into my head, man. One is some advice that a mentor gave to me, years ago. And if you work in an industry where you do have to be into the office, he said this to me. He said, you need to make sure that you get in at least an hour before the person you report to, and stay at least an hour after they leave. And he said, I guarantee you, not once again, not simply for the exercise, but that extra 60 minutes each and every day, while it may not show up in the first week, the first month, 6 months, or the first year, there's going to be a point where the people who joined this organization in the same leadership program and stuff like that, they're your peers, there's going to be a growing chasm that begins to occur, both from your knowledge, both from, once again, your effectiveness in your role, and I think just your overall expertise within whatever industry you are choosing to kind of pursue this career. And so encouragement there. The other thing, which is, literally my podcast, it's my statement, right? Only dream big.
Yeah.
And what I would encourage these 20-somethings to do is there's an exercise that I would encourage you to do. And people are going to say you're crazy, and so you don't have to share this with anybody. But I want you to write down a basically journal of your future self. And I want you to journal what your day is like from the time you wake up to the time you go to bed. And this is future state, right? And so I want you to work through, like, maybe you wake up, you meditate, you work out, you roll over and kiss your significant other, right? You're having breakfast with your family, and then go through the day and write out what you would be working on, right? And this is fine. Like, just the types of projects, people, maybe you're an entrepreneur, maybe you're a senior level executive, maybe you're a coach, right? All the way until the end of the night, as you're, grateful for getting through your day, whatever, and write that out in detail.
That's good.
And then once you do that, then I'm actually going to encourage you to then do it one more time and dream even bigger than what you just wrote down.
Yeah.
And I say that to you because I guarantee you that there are people living their lives in whatever the second way is that you end up writing down. And because they're living their lives in that way, you can do the same thing. That's the second
I love
thing.
that. Yeah.
And then the third piece, which I'm going to try and say without choking up, life is far too short to do anything or work for anyone or in an organization that you are not learning or earning, candidly, right?
Yeah.
And I think it's okay. I would say it is okay to be in a place where you are earning a significant amount of money for a period of time and not necessarily learning. Right? There may be some opportunities where, hey, you're getting paid a stupid amount of money for fresh out of college or anything else, and you should save that and earn that, etc. Right? Tuck it away, because as you're doing that, that should give you more of a foundation and a comfort to then go after what you really want to do. And simultaneously on the learning side, there may be some opportunities where you say, hey, look, I wanted to buy and sell companies, right? I wanted to work in sports at some point, right? I've done free internships, but the learning process of working for someone who you think you want to, achieve what they've achieved or work in the space that they want to work in. It's okay to also be in that space where I'm just in the learning mode right now. I'm not earning a lot of money, but I'm learning what I believe it is that I want to, pursue. And if you find something that allows you to do both, then I would suggest to you that you may have found your purpose.
Learning and earning together. That can be powerful. Yeah.
Powerful. Really powerful, man. So those are three things that I would share with those 20-somethings. And because I'm a little selfish in this moment, I will say to all of the leaders that are listening to this and anyone else who, if someone cared about you enough to forward this episode to you, I want to tell you that if you're not in your 20s and you're in your 30s or you're in your 40s or your 50s or 60s or 70s, right? And insert age, all of those things that I just shared can still be applied to your life.
It's relative.
Because it's all relative, man. And I've lost two people that I loved and admired, one of which was a best friend of mine, passed away a month before his 33rd birthday. And this would have been back in 2015. Super healthy, energetic,
didn't see that coming,
vibrant life, right? Never did. And just earlier this week, lost an uncle of mine who, 67 years old, relatively healthy compared to whatever, a man that I love and admire, phenomenal, just example of a husband and a father, and always had a joke. And actually, just as I'm reflecting on him, like never complained or talked to me about any regrets that he had, right? Worked in pharmaceutical sales, for years, and did really well, retired, and would go on cruises and all of these kind of things, right? And I'm saying that to say, whether you're retired now, whether you're not, if you're early in your career, if you're in the middle of your career, life, man, we could all sit back and say, look, maybe if I'm literally, as I'm sitting here today, if I'm blessed to live as long as my uncle, I got just about 27 years left.
Wow. Yeah.
Do I want to spend time doing, working with people that I don't want to work with, doing activities that I don't want to do? Dreading, literally starting on Saturday night, dreading Monday. Right. Like that is not what we're meant to be, you all. Right. So I encourage all our listeners, and I know that was a little bit of an aside, but that's just the energy I'm on right now, Jeff. And I think it's so important. That's why I love listening to you and hearing your wisdom. When we were talking about time, right, and how valuable time is, right? That's, as a leader, once again, there are so many things that you can achieve. And candidly, there are thousands of lives that you have the ability to impact, because we know that direct leader, when people report to you, that direct leader has such an impact on everyone that they report to. And oh, by the way, you're going to then impact those people's families, friends, and everybody else that they're impacting. So it's accept that role. dream big.
Mm-hmm.
And, I literally, I'm hoping and praying that you're able to achieve all the things you want to achieve. It's been unbelievable having a conversation with you today, man. And
thank you so much.
I hope that this just at least touches one person, because that it may be that person that ultimately impacts millions of lives as a result.
Yeah. Wow, there's a bunch of good stuff. If people, you want to level up your leadership, man, listen to this 2 or 3 times, take notes, write it down, make application of several of these things that Donnie shared with us. That's good stuff. So thanks, man, for sharing. Love your heart and your insights. And it's always great to have you. Great to talk with you. We'll look forward to the next time.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Leadership Level Up. Please subscribe so you don't miss future conversations with great leaders.